Three. Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to travel all the way to Boston, Massachusetts. And we're not going there to interview Tom Brady. I wish we were, but that's not the case. We're actually going to interview somebody that's doing a hell of a lot of, let's say, important things in Boston right now. Just imagine, let me take you down the story. Just imagine having a passion and a talent, and for some reason, you keep stumbling over your own 2 feet, getting in your own way of your own progress, your own demolition mine exploding by actions that you're not taking. Today, we have a beautiful young lady who actually was getting in her own way of self and not being able to unlock her own doors and her passion. And then something happened that made her realize she needs to quit stumbling over her own steps and to find out what her purpose is. Today on the show, all the way from Boston, Mass, I'd like to welcome to the show the newly found writer herself, Alexandra Salmon. Welcome to the show, Alexandria. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Such an interesting pre-interview story. Before we get into that, tell the viewers a little bit about Miss Salmon.
Sure. So I grew up, as you said, in the Boston area in a town about 20 miles west of Boston called Framingham, just a suburb. And I mean, I don't know, I guess pretty typical childhood, but I always had aspirations of being a writer. That's really the only thing I ever really wanted to do with my life. And I was able to do it eventually. It just took a while and longer than it needed to, like you said, getting in my own way. But yeah, I mean, I guess kind of pretty typical things, being involved in sports and different activities and going to school and then going to college and then entering the workforce because I always had, I mean, looking back, I don't know, when you're a kid, I think it's all delusions, but I just thought I would be a writer, like an author. I would be like J.K. Rowling and just make all this money. And then when I was about 19 or 20, I said to myself, well, okay, I haven't done that yet. So I think I'm going to have to do something else for a job.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have to be different than writing. So I was in corporate America for a while, decided that really wasn't for me. Got into real estate, kind of more on the marketing side, and continued my writing the whole time and to this day. That's what I'm doing. So, yeah, it was quite a journey. Again, it didn't have to be as difficult as it was, and that was definitely my own fault for the most part.
I don't know much about Boston. I mean, Foxborough, the legacy with it seems to be really, really family structured. When
Yeah,
when you look at it through the lens of the sports capital, when you look at the Patriots,
yeah,
when you look at the Boston Celtics, our own Indiana's own Larry Bird played uh
yeah.
for Boston, Indiana's own. Let me rephrase that for you again. but but when you hear everything about Boston, you hear that family value principle, that family, everything's about family. What was it like in your household? Because you seem to be really focused with everything that you've done. I find it very difficult to see how you could have not, how you kept stumbling over your own feet. What was it like in your household with your mom and dad growing up and your siblings?
Well, it's funny because, well, you see me now as like, I don't want to say a finished product. We're all
Right.
evolving, but pretty far removed from that. But no, my family was great. So I grew up here with my parents and then my younger sister and younger brother. And yeah, the focus definitely was the family and our community. And, when you talk about all the sports teams, when I think about, uh, I mean, we've been lucky. It's been a really incredible run of success, although it's a little different now.
Mhm.
No, I just, when I think of watching all those games, I really just think about being with my family and with our friends and how it kind of brought everybody in the community together. So that like those are the best memories. Um, but there was a stretch where they were really lousy for a long time. And like if you remember with the Red Sox, it was the whole curse of the Bambino, but it really felt that way because I don't know, you didn't want to expect good things and just get crushed all the time.
Mhm.
But we were kind of in it together.
Right.
So that when it worked out, that's what made it really special.
What was the some of the reasons that you was passionate when you're still passionate? So I'm gonna not use
Yeah.
words. You've always been passionate about writing.
Yeah. No,
Why was there so many detours then? Why were you stepping on your own way of success when you come from a well-structured environment?
yeah. It's interesting because I've thought about that a lot. And as much as I don't really want to like go backwards, I think there is some value in wondering kind of how you got here. Because I think as much as it was a very well structured and I think very well intentioned environment, I think there were some cracks in the structure and maybe some things about my personality left me a little bit vulnerable to that because I think my generation was kind of the first one, I guess I would say, where it was like the world was moving quicker than the expectations of the people who were guiding us
Hmm.
could like get their arms around. And I think like my generation, our parents, everything that they were told to do to have a successful life, it just changed so quickly because the technology moved so fast. So I think, I mean, I'm not the only one. I just think a lot of people of that time got caught up in trying to be successful at a game that had just changed so much. And it was all connected because my um I guess sense of self-worth and value as a person were tied to these achievements. So when I wasn't achieving as much, I didn't really feel good about myself. And I knew the writing was separate from that because it was like I think at this time it was kind of more that you had to be all things to all people. It wasn't enough to excel at one thing. You kind of had to excel at everything, and I do not. So, um, I spent a lot.
Was this the mindset in your home that you had to be successful? Was this something that your mom and dad that you saw with your mom and dad, and you felt you had to live up to these expectations? And then you mentioned something about the cracks. What were some of
Yeah,
the cracks that you had to deal with outside of I get it, the involvement came quick for that generation, you meaning your parents, but what were some of those cracks and what was the expectations that your mom and dad had upon themselves and what were they looking for from you?
I'll say that they're great. They were great and always loved my siblings and I unconditionally. I just think the societal pressure was so great, and I think they were kind of playing into it again, well intentioned because they wanted us to be successful and do well in life. And at that time, it was very much okay, well, you have to get good grades and you have to be involved in all these extracurriculars and be really well-rounded at everything so you can get into a good college and secure yourself a good job and a solid path to life. And I think, 15, 20 years later, I think we know that um, that's not the guarantee it was in the 80s when they were doing it themselves.
Hmm.
Because now you look at this generation, and I think because everybody goes to college, they're all competing with each other. So it doesn't guarantee you a good job. And a lot of people are in debt, have like try to finance this education, and then the cost of living is just skyrocketed. So it's become sort of a disaster. Again, not that they could have known that, but they thought kind of steering us towards a certain path was going to be the unlock to success, and it didn't totally play out that way.
Mhm.
So for me, I think I always knew my success would really be tied to my writing because it was this one thing that I always had. Even when I was a little girl, I could kind of just tell that it was because I think when you're really young and the adults around you I think you can tell when they're genuinely impressed with you as opposed to when they're just sort of like placating you. Because how many times can you be like, look at this, a
Right.
day and have the same enthusiasm? So I could tell it was a little different and I kind of had something. But at the same time, I always sort of thought that everybody had it because you only know yourself. It
Right.
was only when I got to school when I could read and write because I just loved to do both of those things. My mom read to us every night, so I was just exposed to a lot of books and I already had a passion for reading and writing stories down. I learned to write so I could write my stories down because I just loved telling them. And then when I got to school, I realized that not only could not everybody do that, but some people found it challenging. So I always knew it was like my thing, but at the same time, there were so many other things that were not my thing. And I think the flaws were really just amplified because, again, it was well intentioned. I think all the adults kind of steering it wanted the kids they were guiding to sort of clean that up so it wouldn't hold them back.
Mhm.
But I think, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, they all screwed us and this was all wrong, because I'm sure some people handled it differently, but I was just like a little more sensitive. So I just took it to mean I wasn't really measuring up. So I think as much as I loved writing and I was doing it all the time, I was very much afraid to put it out there because if I failed at that too, then I really had nothing. Like it would mean I was a failure, and then I don't know where I would have gone from there.
You talk about your parents, and did they know of your passion for writing?
Yes.
Did
Oh
they
yes.
encourage you to pursue it, or was because
Yeah.
when you're dealing with that particular time frame, maybe they might have looked at it as not a steady and guaranteed career?
Well, no, so they were always very supportive of it and always encouraging me to keep at it, and that they really enjoy what I have to read. And to this day, they still love to read it. But yeah, no, they were definitely realistic in that I needed to find a way to support myself. And if that wasn't going to be it, then I would have to supplement it with something else until I could get there.
What were some of the things that your parents probably did to keep you grounded, but at the same time, still try to respect your dreams and wishes?
Um, that's a great question because I think they were great at that. They were always very encouraging. Anytime I'll bring the writing to them, they just, they very much want to hear about it. They're very supportive of it. I
Mhm.
think another thing that they did that, not that I realized at the time that they were, um, the impact of what they were doing was, but that it was very impactful was they would share it with other people because they were proud of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, but at the same time, each step of my life, like when I was a teenager, probably 16, 17 years old, I had gone to summer camp for most of my life. And then this was the first year I'd kind of aged out of it. So my dad was like, well, you have to go get a job. I was like, I mean, not that I didn't want to work. It was just, I had never, I mean, I had done like odd jobs around the neighborhood or like babysitting, but I had never been employed.
Mhm.
So they were like, well, it's time to go do that. And they didn't push too hard on that, but they were kind of like, they kind of let me figure it out with them. I'm like, okay, like how do I do that? And they're like, well, you should go to the mall and see if anybody's hiring and put in an application. And I was just like, okay, that's a good idea. That's kind of
Mhm.
how it worked out. So yeah, at every step it was kind of that. And then college, not that we ever talked about it, but just again in the suburban Boston environment that I grew up in. And this didn't necessarily come from them, but like I said, they played into it with only the best of intentions. But it was very much that like you were a loser if you didn't go to college, and you were destined for a subpar life where you would not be able to support yourself as much as somebody who did. So it was
Uh,
like I never questioned that.
how far did that way of thinking, if you don't go to college, you're basically excommunicated from the quote unquote community of the Boston lifestyle type thing? How much did that really impact you and even more derail you from, not derail you, let me use another word, putting your dreams of being a writer one cart behind instead of one cart moving forward?
Probably more than I thought it did at the time, honestly, because like we all only have so much time in a day. So I knew that the path that I was being guided towards was just going to take a lot of time
Mm,
to be able to invest in being a viable candidate to go to college. But yeah, no, definitely. I think it was like a subconscious thing. Um, Not that you would have been excommunicated, but definitely looked down upon. And I already felt like I was looked down upon because I think people already thought I wasn't like a very good student. There were certain things in the academic environment that did not come easily to me. So I felt that my level of intelligence and competence was being questioned all the time. So
mhm.
I already felt like a loser. So it was very important to me to prove that they were wrong, basically.
When
And
did
that probably became more important than writing, I would say.
when did the before I ask that this question, what were some of the footsteps that you stumbled on through this journey until you was able to say, okay, I'm gonna tackle this head on? What were three impactful moments that you kept stumbling over that clearly, if you can go back and say, man, I shouldn't have done that? What were those three things that you kept stumbling over?
Oh my God, yeah, if I could go back and just smack this girl. Um, yeah, I don't know that I would have not gone to college because I think there was a lot of value in that experience, but I think once I was there, I think I would have tried to stay out of the culture that was like drinking and partying just because again, and I mean I don't mean this disrespectfully because I had a lot of nice friends and we had a lot of fun and I realized that's kind of like the probably the most popular like college culture, but looking back it just seems to be a waste of time. I just think if I had done more productive things with that time, I would have certainly been further along. Um, I think it's also, I don't know, there was never like a blueprint of here's how to be a writer. It's funny because I've told this story before, but when I was in high school, I had read a Jodi Picoult book and I emailed her because at this point she was like so prolific. Like you go to an airport, it's like all her books. She probably has at least 40 at this point. And I could never even really like finish a story. And again, this was really like very early, me getting in my own way. And I think enough people have this problem because there's a name for it. They call it writer's block.
Okay.
And I emailed her and I said, Jodi, what do you do about writer's block? And God bless her, she replied. And she goes, Alexandra, she said, I don't have time for writer's block. And it was a great answer, honestly, because at the time she had three young kids. So she's kind of balancing her time with that. And she said, I just sit down and I write from, I don't know, whatever, 9 to 10 in the morning, let's say it is. She's like, even if it's just my grocery list, because it's like you start and then you keep going.
Hmm.
So I mean, let's say for the 4 years I was in college, I spent part of my time like being a good student and, like fulfilling my obligation. But then I spent all the time that I spent like drinking and partying and just doing stupid things. What if I had said, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours that day writing?
Hmm.
I mean, I could have maybe written two or three books by then, but now I just have one and I'm working on a couple others. But because I mean, not every book like is worthy of being published. Sometimes you write it and you're like, you know what, I don't really like this, but still, um, that's definitely like I think I would have again, if I could have gotten out of my own way, like to nip that in the bud, definitely then I mean, probably the same thing once I got into like corporate America, because it was, you know what, in a way, it was a little bit of an extension of college because I think uh, people in that lifestyle, especially when you're young and you kind of have a little bit of disposable income and you don't have family obligations yet,
Mhm.
they kind of spend their free time doing the same things. So I wanted to do what my friends were doing. Again, if I had spent that time writing and learning how to market myself as a writer, I mean, I'm 37 years old. If I like, that's, let's say that's 20 years. I mean, could
That's a
have
lot of
written way
time.
more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a lot of
exactly.
wasted time. You wind up going
Right.
to
Like I don't have
college.
this much to show for it.
You wind up going to college though. Did you consult with literary professors and authors and so forth about your dream and ambitions? I mean, you did say that there is no blueprint, but technically that lady did have the blueprint that when you
Oh,
reached out.
she does. Yeah.
There is no time. If you're a writer, you need to be there. But you went to college and stuff. Wasn't any of the professors instrumental in helping you design some road to success to your dreams instead of 37 years old?
Um, you know, it's interesting because again, they were all really good to me and very smart and good at what they did.
Mhm.
But I only one was an author. I think they were all really supportive. They probably didn't feel like I think what I really needed to hear at the time was to be like, get it together. But I think they probably felt like that wasn't their place necessarily to say it. But no, and everybody I shared that dream with, I think, because also they were familiar with my writing, even though it wasn't as creative, it was more like academic papers. But I think they could see that I was good enough at it that I could be a writer, and I would say they were all very supportive and encouraging.
When you decided to really tackle this full on and decided you're sick and tired of being sick and tired and kind of like
Yeah.
taking advantage of what she told you, she doesn't have time to sit, she writes. How did you determine what you wanted to actually write about? You do nonfiction, but being a writer and reading as many books and novels as you have clearly done, how did you determine which area of your writing expertise that you wanted to focus on? And then the second part of that question is, how did you know that that part was going to really resonate your personality and relate to the individuals like myself, the actual reader?
Well, it's interesting because you know what? I think I probably wasn't that like strategic or like savvy with it. I think first of all, I already like the idea for Can't Turn Back. I had that actually while I was still in college. So I don't know. I guess now that we're talking about it now, because I was kind of on that path of like the path that I was on is the path that gave me the idea for the book. Because I was 21, I was interning for a PR firm because I thought, maybe that's something I sort of wanted to do
Mhm.
once I got a job. So I was, like taking the steps to do it. And this PR firm was not so they did not represent Verizon, but at the time that I was working there, Verizon had had some sort of data breach where people who were in the witness protection program, their data was compromised. So this was like people were talking about around the office, like, oh God, imagine representing Verizon now. Like, this is not a good look.
Right.
And yeah, so I was it was a summer internship. So I was living with my parents at home. And I came home and I was telling my mother this story, and we were kind of talking about what it would be like to be in the witness protection program, which is that, like, she said, somebody, like, you could never tell anybody where you're going, obviously. She said somebody would just have to come get you in the middle of the night. And that would be it. And I was like, wow, that's a great idea for a book. And, it's funny because I think there probably is some level of like arrogance slash delusion maybe you need to do it, especially for the first time. Because I never thought about like how that might resonate with readers. I mean, in a sense, I guess I knew that it would just because those kind of themed stories always do well. But mostly I think my thought was, oh, well, people will definitely read it just because I wrote it.
Mm. When
Um,
What made you come up with the title Can't Turn Back. What made you come up with that title for your first novel? That is available. Let me tell the viewers right now, it is available. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. But what made you decide to come up with that particular title, Can't Turn Back? Did this have to do with the experience that you went through, or was it more so to captivate the audience into the fictional story?
Yeah, well, it actually had a different title before. I just thought this one was more accurate to the plot, so I did change it. It really, well, I don't know. On a conscious level, it had nothing to do with me. Subconsciously, maybe it did have more to do with it because like you said, I had this idea before I like got serious about it, but again, it took a long time just because for so long I wasn't serious about it and I would just write kind of intermittently. I think a lot of people are kind of like this because they're like, oh, I'll just write when inspiration strikes me. But in reality, it's just like anything else. You just have to carve out time, sit down and do it.
What
And
kind
once I,
Go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
what?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, once I had that mindset with it, because it had taken probably 6 or 7 years at that point to get to like not even that much content, like maybe 20, like the average novel is 80,000 words. So I had maybe 20,000 at this point of 7 years of just like meandering through life. And then once I was able to shift my mindset and focus, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do 1,000 words a day no matter what. It only took 6 months to finish it.
What's the response that you got once 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 the novel came out? What was the reviews like for you? And were they the reviews you wanted to hear for your first novel?
I think for me at this point, the reviews were like icing on the cake. I just wanted to do it because again, I had spent my whole life dreaming of it and not doing it. I just wanted to know that I was capable of it. So if people liked it or not, like, because I had sort of like I had sort of a breakthrough. I guess I was 28 years old, and what had happened, because you said something happened. This is what it was. So I had somebody very close to me. It was my mom's best friend. We called her Aunt Kathy. We were very close. And she passed away. She had uterine cancer. It was awful. And I I mean, I always knew how much she loved me and the impact she had, but I realized that she was one of the only people in my life who really, it was not everything I'm describing about what I was achieving and how that compared to other people. She really just didn't care about that. She just saw the qualities in me that she thought were good and admirable. And that was worth more to her than any measure of achievement. And I kind of thought to myself, what if I could see myself the way that she did? Because I really didn't. I saw myself as this underachieving loser because all these other people did, and I figured they must be right and she must be wrong. But then after she passed away, um, all of these same people like couldn't they couldn't like honor her fast enough. There were over 600 people at her funeral. There was a scholarship fund in her memory that came together very quickly. And I said, well, if her like if she was kind of the best that society had to offer, then maybe her opinion should matter the most, which was that it really didn't matter if I was a writer. It just mattered that I was this person who was, I don't know, I guess kind, thoughtful, sweet, had a passion for writing. Like, sure, that helps, but that's not the end all be all. And then that's what made me realize it really didn't matter if this book was like, commercially successful or not. So at this point, I just wanted to do it to prove to myself that I could do it. So then once it came out and people did like it, I felt like beyond lucky.
when when you say that, it's amazing how you got that beast mindset to get back on track and move forward. And sorry about the loss of your family member, but it's
Thank
funny
you.
through that through that loss, the encouragement amplified in you so beautifully. But my question here is, you reached out to a lady, Arthur, during your time of questioning your own self.
Yes.
How many individuals do you think, and this is hypothesis, you may not know, just imagine how many people might have want to do the same thing that you did and reached out to the lady or the loss of a family member. Since your book's been out, has anybody reached out to you that probably had the same type of journey that you have?
Maybe not the same type of journey, but I do always try to be mindful of that because people like, I guess people kind of, maybe not necessarily in my circle, but they know me and know that I've written a book at the very least. I have had people reach out because that's something that they've wanted to do. And I've tried to be very just mindful of everybody who helped me along the way because those people did not have to. So if I can help somebody else, I certainly want to. Like I had somebody actually just yesterday reach out to me, the guy that I went to high school with and is thinking about going the self-publishing route and had some questions. And, I was happy to help him however I can because, again, I wouldn't be here without the people who helped me, but also, um, there were some things that I kind of had to learn on my own. So, and it took time. So if I can help somebody else do it in less time, I'm really happy to do that.
What were some of the things that you had to learn that were really helpful in moving forward with your career outside of what your she's your aunt, right? Said, but what were some of those things that you really needed to know this in order to go forward?
Um, I mean, just really that it's like you kind of have to treat it like anything else, where it's not, because I think, I don't know, if you're in sales, I think you think of it as a numbers game. So you're like, okay, if I want to make 10 sales a year and I have, or whatever, 10 sales a month, like you probably can't live on 10 sales a year depending on what you're selling. Let's say you want to do 10 a month and your success rate is like, I don't know, let's say it's 10%, then you got to get in front of 100 people. Like, so you're like, okay, then it takes me this amount of time to do this. And it's just like you're very exact with it. It's really not emotional. I wouldn't say it's really necessarily creative. So then I think when it's a creative skill like writing, people think it doesn't work that way when in reality it does. Because if you go to any university in the country, there are plenty of very creative, probably very talented writers
Mhm.
who haven't written anything outside of class assignments because they think that this approach is really like anti-creativity, but that's it's wrong. I would say that's when people aren't doing it that way, it's their own version of getting in their own way. Like they're not ready to share their writing with the world, and I don't know what that reason is, but like they have one and it's good enough. But yeah, I would say that the biggest unlock, like hack,
Mhm.
is again, it's what Jodi Picoult said all those years ago. That I mean, all like you just have to write. You just have to put in the work every day, a certain number of like you just have to put in a certain input every day to get a certain output. And look, like if you sit down and you're going to write, let's say it's 500 words a day, the chances of the like 450 of those words being terrible on any given day is quite high,
Mhm.
but they all add up.
She gave you some key information, and I see that
Yeah.
you're actually taking that into the fullest, where she said she doesn't have time to have writer's block.
I don't have time for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
What
What a
what
legend.
how does that resonate with you now? Because that's some key thing. I don't have time. How does that resonate with you now?
You know what? You're right. Because it's like, it's different. When I was 15, I'm like, what do you mean you have time? Because like when you're young and you think you have nothing but time, you approach it differently. But I think, I don't know. Um, I mean, I'm 37 now. I think anybody who's made it this far, like, you don't have as much time as you think. There are people that you grew up with who aren't around anymore
Mm.
based because of, either I'm some sort of tragedy or whatever it is. So you just never know. I think for her it was just because like she had such a busy life with her kids, but really like we all only have so many hours of the day, so you have to make it a priority. And I bet I would have said that I was making it a priority because it took up a lot of time and energy to think about, but I wasn't executing. And that's like that like that's it right there. What she said was so simple and so brilliant. And I hope I can meet her one day so I can thank her.
Before we wrap up, what are
Yeah,
some of the things that, a two-part question,
sure.
what are some of the things based on what you went through that you would share with up and coming writers or just people that want to live the dream, not necessarily writers, because I think this is a message that resonates with anybody. I don't think it necessarily has to be classified as writers or anything like that. This is a message that clearly can resonate with anybody. What would you tell individuals about that? And then the second part of that question is, what's your end game here?
Sure. I think it would be two things. I think it would be that you just you just have to be consistent and track what you're doing. Again, it sounds like anti-creative, but you have to take that approach because I think once you set parameters, you can be as creative as you want. Or at least I found that like that's what works for me. I'm not big into like giving people advice because I certainly don't have it all figured out and I could change my mind at any time. But the other thing I would say with that, and I don't think I'll ever change my mind on this because I know how much or just like how painful it was to arrive at this conclusion is that whatever your dream is, um, like you are not that end result. That might be something that you do and you enjoy or you're good at, but that's like that's not the end all be all. There's more to life than whatever that is.
How can the viewers reach out to you for questions, answers, and more importantly, to get a copy of the new novel, Can't Turn Back?
So you can find me on Instagram at Alexandra J Salmon. You can find me on Facebook, Alexander Salmon, or X, Alexander Salmon, LinkedIn, Alexander Salmon. You can get the book on Amazon. It's called Can't Turn Back. Or if you live in Boston or if you're visiting Boston, you can get it at one bookstore in the entire world. It's called I Am Books, and it's on Salem Street in Boston.
Now,
And the end game is just to keep writing.
the game is to keep writing, and you're doing that right now. Without giving a
Yes.
spoiler alert, what are the new novels that you're working on currently right now?
Okay, so there's two. One I'm gonna try and get out next year. The other one I guess would be right after that. So it's about the first one that I'm currently writing. It's about this couple, like this typical kind of younger couple. They live in Boston. Um, they have one child. They want another one. They live kind of like in a two-bedroom condo. So space is an issue. And they have these aspirations of living in this kind of ritzy town north of the city. So their dreams are kind of like, when we can afford to live there, that's when we'll have another kid. And then the issue gets forced when the wife finds out she's pregnant just before COVID. And then during COVID, when the world is shut down, they have this once in a lifetime opportunity to buy a home in this town from the estate of like a family friend. So they do it and they move there, and everything seems really like idyllic. Everybody's really nice, but something just seems like a little off. And I'm not going to say what it is, but like there's a reason this is all too good to be true.
It sounds like a definitely thriller to pick up and read and enjoy. You know what? Thank you so much. I'm glad that you was able to um, put the right foot in front of the other and not stumble anymore over your own feet. You definitely are inspiration to other young individuals out there that when they have a dream, they go after it. Once again, thank you for coming on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.